West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Chef Justice Putnam. netrootsradio.com.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
It's unprecedented. The January 6th committee subpoenaing 5 sitting lawmakers for the first time. That is a huge deal. Lawmakers rarely subpoena their own colleagues, including GOP leader Kevin McCarthy, compelling them to sit for depositions by the end of the month. McCarthy, who was caught on tape talking about kicking Trump out of office, infamously ran to Mar-a-Lago weeks later. Chairman Benny Thompson writing, quote, "You declined voluntary cooperation, and we are left with no choice but to issue you this subpoena." In a letter sent asking for his cooperation in January, the committee said they wanted to talk to McCarthy about his, quote, "conversations with President Trump before, during, and after the violent January 6th attack." McCarthy today slamming the committee's probe.
I have not seen the subpoena. I guess they sent it to you guys before they sent it to me. Look, my view on the committee has not changed. They're not conducting a legitimate investigation. It seems as though they just want to go after their political opponents.
Congressman Scott Perry having a similar reaction today.
The fact that they send it to the press before they send it to the members just proves it's all about headlines. This whole thing's a charade.
Committee Chairman Benny Thompson today saying he hopes they all comply, and so far there have not been conversations about contempt if they don't. January 6th committee member Jamie Raskin today emphasizing the unprecedented nature of January 6th when asked about the decision to subpoena fellow lawmakers.
Well, an attempted coup and a violent insurrection at the Capitol interrupting the peaceful transfer of power are unprecedented events. They should come in and testify voluntarily. And if they don't, then all of us should come to expect that they could be subpoenaed for it.
Joining me now, former acting U.S. Solicitor General Neil Katyal and former federal prosecutor Barbara McQuaid. Neil, the three of us have sat here many times asking, will they, won't they? They have your reaction to these subpoenas.
I'm so glad to see Congress doing this. They gave these members of Congress the choice to come in voluntarily back as early as January. They all refused. And so now what are they saying? Well, they're saying, oh, this is about headlines and anti-Trump. I mean, you know, there are a lot of anti-Trump people that the Congressional Committee could have subpoenaed. They could have subpoenaed Marjorie Taylor Greene or Matt Gaetz or any number of kind of people like that. They didn't. This is not 5 random people. These are 5 material witnesses, and the committee has said in their letters that they have evidence that Mark Meadows was being plotted with these members of Congress, that these members of Congress were plotting with Ali Alexander and others as well, like Jeffrey Clark, trying to maneuver for him to be acting attorney general and boot out the old attorney general, Jeffrey Rosen, who wasn't doing Trump's bidding. So all of this is really important information. You know, I'm a little upset it's taken this long long to get to the subpoena, but I'm really, really glad to see Congress doing this today.
And we'll talk in a minute about how time is of the essence here. But Barbara, talk to me about the significance of the committee subpoenaing their own colleagues.
Well, as you heard Representative Raskin say there, it's unprecedented. Calling a member of their own before the committee with a subpoena, not a voluntary sit down, but a subpoena, is unprecedented. But you know what else is unprecedented? An attempt to attack the Capitol and stop the peaceful transfer of power. And so for that reason, the stakes are high, and calling them in with a subpoena, I think, is absolutely appropriate under these circumstances. Some interesting things about their compliance. Will they comply, or do they go after the legitimacy of the committee, as we are hearing some of them do? The tables are going to be turned one of these days, and they may want to subpoena other members of Congress. And so they need to think carefully about whether they harm the institution. The other things they can't rely on here, as some of the other witnesses have, there is no attorney-client privilege at issue here. There is no executive privilege at issue here. This really is a question of people who have evidence and need to produce it to the committee that is legitimately investigating a very serious matter.
Neil, I fully take Barb's point. I also want to point out, though, these Republicans have shown little concern for institutions, right? If that is supposed to be the driving, motivating factor for them to comply, they haven't exactly shown a history of making that a priority.
That's 100% right, and they've also not respected precedent at all. And Barbara has been absolutely brilliant in making the case for the crimes that were committed on January 6th. She wrote essentially a prosecution memo about this. The one thing I would just quibble with her on this is that there is actually precedent. The ethics committees have subpoenaed members of Congress before, and some of them have even gone to court. So we have seen this, a member of congressional committee subpoenaing a member of Congress. She's absolutely right. Given their their disregard of institutions and their coup-like behavior, I expect them to fight this. And so the Congress has two tools available to it. One is the criminal contempt statute, which has been around since 1857, and allows them to say to the Justice Department, look, we need this information. You need to put these people in jail until they give it to us. The other is that Congress itself can file a civil lawsuit in Washington, D.C. to get at this information. Either way, the congressional committees, if this does go to court, I'm quite sure will prevail. There's an obvious need for this information. The arguments on the other side are bogus. There's really two. One, the members of Congress are saying they have a right to privacy, which is particularly ironic because I haven't seen them exactly, protesting over the last week on the Supreme Court steps. But I guess they think men in Congress have a right to privacy and the rest of us don't. And then the second thing that they will say is speech or debate immunity. That's a clause in the Constitution which says in general members of Congress have immunity while on the floor. But that's got to be a legislative act. And plotting a coup or refusing to answer questions under oath is not exactly a legislative act.
Barbara, as Neil just said, you have brilliantly laid all of this out. So in the spirit of asking you to do that once again, what does the committee want to learn from these depositions?
Well, unlike a criminal prosecution, what the committee really is trying to learn here is everything that happened. They are trying to chronicle the facts in the same way that the September 11th committee put together that extensive report and then used it as a way to guide legislation to fill in gaps in the law. In the same way, this committee has been charged with figuring out what happened. And an essential part of that story is figuring out what these 5 members of Congress were doing and saying as this attack was occurring. We know several of them were talking with President Trump while things were occurring. We know that at least one of them, reports say, was seeking pardons for some of the people who might be involved in the attacks. And so it's very important to understand what they were saying, when they were saying it, what they were aware of Donald Trump was saying to help put this whole story together. And one other thing, I wonder Neil's thoughts on this. We talked about contempt power with a criminal prosecution or a civil case. I think this is the one place where there may be some congressional inherent contempt power. We've seen this sort of power just slip away and not be used. But when it is members of Congress who are subject to that subpoena, the committee has some powers to recommend censure and other kinds of things against its own members that's unique to its members and different from all of these other witnesses who have been flouting subpoenas.
Neil, Barbara wants your thoughts, and so do I.
That's exactly right. Barbara's right. So there's an inherent contempt power. It goes all the way back to the founding of the Constitution. It's been upheld by the Supreme Court. It's so extensive, it even allows members of Congress to jail someone. There's a jail in the Capitol that could be used for this. And Barbara's right to say there's also steps short of that, from censure or stripping committee assignments, or even docking their pay. There's a bunch of different options. And I think the problem for these 5 members of Congress, when they go and attack this subpoena and say it's about headlines or something, I think Barbara's isolated the important question, which is, what would these 5 members of Congress want an investigation to do? A committee charged with trying to get the truth of January 6th? Of course you'd need to know what these 5 people were doing and what they said and who they said it to. They were material witnesses. It would be a bogus investigation if they couldn't get at this information. That's why I think, whether it's inherent contempt or whether it's a court case or whatever, these folks are going to get the information that they need to get.
Barbara, I want you to take a listen to what committee member Congressman Schiff said today.
These members clearly have relevant information for the committee and for the country, and they took an oath to uphold the Constitution. This is part of upholding the oath.
Here's the thing, Barbara. There's an argument that Democrats know they have to make to the American people that counters this idea of what you're going to hear from Republicans about how this is all bogus. And that's it right there, right? You had Congressman Schiff laying out exactly what Neil laid out. They have information. We just want to hear it. Why should that be so complicated?
Yeah, I think sometimes we see cynical politicians and others talk in terms of sound bites, counting on the fact that members of the public are too busy to pay attention to the details. And so if they simply say things like they're going after us because they're going after their political opponents, they take this very high level argument, then many people won't listen to the details. But I think that's why it's so critically important to get them to testify, because it's always the facts that matter. What was said? You can paint in all these broad brushes about motives and other kinds of things all day long. But at the end of the day, this is about facts. And the only way we're going to learn those facts is by bringing them into the committee room and putting them under oath and asking them.
Neil, Congressman Jim Jordan has historically dodged questions about when he talked to Trump on January 6th. Take a listen.
Did you talk to the former president that day?
I've talked to the former president umpteen times.
I mean, on January 6th, Congressman.
Yes, I've talked to the president. I've talked to the president so many. I can't remember all the days I've talked to him, but I've certainly talked to the president.
Did you speak with him before, during, or after the Capitol was attacked?
I'd have to go. I spoke with him that day after. I think after. I don't know if I spoke with him in the morning or not. I just don't know.
So, Neil, I subject you to that footage to ask you if the committee will be able to get the truth if he's deposed. Or are we going to have more of that game of whack-a-mole?
Well, you can't watch that testimony and think that this guy's credible in any particular way. I mean, it's just a not convincing performance. He can't keep his misstatements and lies straight. So, I expect more of that. But I think, Alicia, the hard thing is for them is, at some point, they've got, they keep on saying we're afraid to testify, and they keep on, slinging mud at the committee or this and that. But the bottom line is that they just never want to actually go in under oath and tell the truth. That's the thing they're afraid of. And, my suspicion is for a good reason, because, the Jim Jordans of the world and others were involved in all this stuff, and they're afraid of it all coming out. But the committee has the powers, and have today taken the most important step in trying to get that information to the American people.
It is Friday, the 13th of May of 2022, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Gunner the English Bulldog is our snoozing sous chef, and our daily special is Blue Moon Spirits Fridays, because we are all Nighthawks in the Diner of Life. Yeah, put that in your hopper. How are ya? We still, right now, currently, abortion is still legal in the United States, so just letting you know. But looks like Kevin McCarthy and his 4 friends, well, some people might call them Stonewall jackoffs, but I would never say that. Never. But that's what happens when you stonewall. No one is supposed to be above the law. I know that they've been acting with impunity as if they are. And maybe we might be able to pull it back and have a functioning society once again. Maybe. I think that these folk know how to monkey wrench the system to turn it fascist. I always thought when they were going to monkey wrench, in the old environmental way, that, we might become more egalitarian, say. On the other hand, I got to tell you, where I'm living, there's a lot of pothead Nazis, so apparently pot doesn't make one docile. So we can put that reefer madness lie to bed, if you're into cliches. All right. So, Trump looks like if we have, a DOJ with some, what's the term? I don't know. I'm trying to get out of this overly masculine way of looking at the world, but I just can't. Anyway, if they had the cojones, they could indict Trump for espionage. What was he going to do? First of all, we don't know what was in those boxes because they're top secret. Okay? But what was he going to do with that? Was he going to leverage it somehow as blackmail against people? Was he going to sell it to a hostile foreign power? Even selling it to a friendly is not good. So, will the DOJ, shall we say, pull the trigger? Will they? I don't know. I don't know what it is about this guy that he gets away with it the way that he does. Or is it that people in his rarefied clime have always gotten away with it, but since he's visible, we think it's happening now and only to him? Okay. Elon Musk has put his purchase of Twitter on hold. He made it sound like, something really benign, but it comes on the heels of the SEC filing some sort of investigative thing against him for buying Twitter with no money and causing Tesla stock to pretty much tank, even though they don't have one. Okay. All right. They had to recall apparently almost a couple 100,000 Teslas across all makes and years for, I guess, the screen heating up and causing some part of the car to catch on fire. Hate doing that at 70 miles an hour on the Bay Shore, huh? Yeah, I would. Okay, it's been a while since I've been on the Bay Shore. I look at the skyline now when I'm watching Giants games, and I was thinking, isn't this earthquake country that we all live in, even up here in Oregon, the subduction zone? Yeah, I mean, I don't know. The higher you go, the more you're going to let it jiggle and wiggle on the shock absorbers. I think at some point, it's not good. I really don't. The Millennium Tower was tilting at a precipitous rate when I moved up here to take care of dear old mom. All right. Well, I don't know. We think that we can cheat death and destruction. And then when it befalls us, we go, oh, it's God's God. God did it. No, I think that sometimes we might be responsible for the death and destruction that we see happening all around us. Okay, those fires didn't just start happening, and it didn't happen because of an arson, unless you want to say that the fossil fuel industry might be arsonists. Maybe they wanted to see the world on fire. Okay. They hid the fact that they were doing it for a long time. In fact, they still haven't really admitted it, even though they've gotten caught. But that's a story for another day. Talking about people getting caught, we should get right into the opening here in the menu in the Bistro Cafe part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Yeah, it's Friday. So, because greed, I don't know, greed is a motivating factor for these Trumpers, these maggots. I don't know. We might even want to call them deplorables. Well, Trump officials and meat processors work closely to keep plants open in the first year of the pandemic, even though they knew workers were rapidly getting infected because they didn't care. Cogs. And when you got a Trump administration that thinks so little of life that you got the guy at the top saying, hey, just shoot those protesters, those Black Lives Matter people, which also had Christian pastors in the midst of them. Shoot them in the legs. Okay. Oh, my God. Well, as we continue here, I should mention at the top that the January 6th committee subpoenaed those 5 House Republicans after they stonewalled the panel. We sort of went through that. Don't stonewall them. Okay, stonewall jackoffs. That's what we'll call them. Okay, continuing here in the Bistro Cafe, the California Coastal Commission voted unanimously to deny a permit to build a $1.4 billion seawater desalination plant. I don't know if that's good or bad, but maybe it's not so good. And with Russia's invasion of Ukraine revealing Vlad's intent, the U.S. Army is poised to revamp its forces in Alaska to better prepare for future cold weather conflicts. I wonder what our Army knows, and why are they doing this now? After the break, we move to the chef's table, where a European Union plan aims to help get wheat from Ukraine to the world. And Costa Rica declared a state of emergency after a month of crippling ransomware attacks. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. At netrootsradio.com. To the right of the page is the chat room link right there by the social media scroll. And the chat room is monitored by Kelly Lincoln, who will be at Netroots Nation this year, so we'll look forward to that. Thank you, Kelly. To the left of the chat room link across the page that's near the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com is the link to our Patreon page. And I got to tell you, we could use some help. And if you could become a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio and possibly send us what you might spend on an espresso-type coffee drink once a month, it would really help. So click on that Patreon link and button and follow the instructions and help us out. Because I got to tell you, we do need the help. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, you can do so. And I think we're still going to be doing it since Ellen has put his, is it Ellen? The musky guy, the smelly guy. He's put his purchase on hold, so we're in stasis right now. I think that we might still be able to have a Twitter. And you can find me on Twitter at Justice Putnam and follow me there because I post the show notes and links diary on Daily Codes about 10 minutes before showtime. And then I really, as I've said before, really try to get it posted up on Twitter and other social media platforms before showtime. Sometimes it's during the clip up top and sometimes much later. I'm sorry. It gets busy around here. And anyway, the show notes and links is where you can find the real reportage and the complete articles, too. The complete. Follow the show on Twitter at Cookbook West and pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, and wherever podcasts can be found. And, of course, the Deep State Archive, the state of things as they are. of the Netroots Radio Library over all these many 11 years can be found at the Internet Archive at archive.org. That's right. 11 years and counting. All right, this first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Blue Moon Spirits Fridays, the French 77s are all virtually mixed, poured, and ready for your virtual imbibing. As we begin this first offering by Josh Funk out of the Associated Press. During the first year of the COVID-19 pandemic, the meat processing industry worked closely with political appointees in the Trump administration to stave off health restrictions and keep slaughterhouses open, even as the virus spread rapidly among workers, according to a congressional report released yesterday, Thursday. The report by the House Select Subcommittee on the Coronavirus Crisis said meat companies pushed to keep their plants open even though they knew workers were at high risk of catching the coronavirus. The lobbying led to health and labor officials watering down their recommendations. Lobbying? Sounds like, I don't know. Sounds like collusion to me anyway. Watering down the recommendations for the industry and culminated in an executive order by Trump issued in spring of 2020 designating meat plants as critical infrastructure that needed to remain open and let them work without masks. Democratic Representative Jim Clyburn, who leads the subcommittee, said the U.S. Department of Ag officials and the industry prioritized production and profits over the health of workers and communities, as at least 59,000 workers caught the virus and 269 died. If we were a functioning society, there would be a criminal justice indictment for this behavior. Jackson of the Associated Press brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Blue Moon Spirits Fridays. A California coastal panel rejected a long-standing proposal to build a $1.4 billion seawater desalination plant to turn Pacific Ocean water into drinking water as the state grapples with persistent drought that is expected to worsen in coming years with climate change. The state's Coastal Commission voted unanimously to deny a permit for Poseidon Waters to build a plant to produce 50 million gallons of water a day in Huntington Beach, which is southeast of Los Angeles. Poseidon said it was disappointed in the decision. I should mention that there is a gigantic Chevron refinery right on the beach in Huntington Beach. Well, Bolsa Chica, you know what I mean. California continues to face a punishing drought with no end in sight, a company statement said. Every day we see new calls for conservation as reservoir levels drop to dangerous lows. We firmly believe that this desalination project would have created a sustainable drought-tolerant source of water. The vote came after a heated meeting before the commission, attended by dozens of supporters and critics of the plan. It was considered a crucial decision on the future of the plant after years of other hearings and delays. Poseidon's long-running proposal was supported by Governor Newsom, but faced ardent opposition from environmentalists who said drawing in large amounts of ocean water and releasing salty discharge back into the ocean, let's make the ocean saltier, would kill billions of tiny marine organisms that make up the base of the food chain, along with a large swath of the coast. Well, you know what they could do? They could tow like an iceberg that's like falling off of some sort of Antarctic or Arctic shelf, and then we could have it like melt and then dilute the salty water. We could, if you're, I don't know, reading a comic book. The ocean is under attack from climate change already, Commissioner Dana Bocho said. I cannot say in good conscience that this amount of damage is okay. Other critics said the water would be too expensive and wasn't urgently needed in the area where it would be built, which is less dependent on state and federal water due to an ample aquifer and water recycling program. Commissioners cited those issues in following a staff recommendation and rejecting the proposal. They also cited the energy cost of running the plant and the fact that it would sit in an earthquake fault zone. Lolita C. Baldor of the AP brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. The U.S. Army is poised to revamp its forces in Alaska to better prepare for future cold weather conflicts, and it is expected to replace the larger, heavily equipped Stryker Brigade in the state with a more mobile infantry unit, better suited for the frigid fight, Army leaders say. Army Secretary Christine Wormuth said she expects to make a final decision soon about the Alaska troop change, saying she will likely convert the Stryker unit, which uses heavy 8-wheeled vehicles, to an infantry brigade. I think right now the purpose of Army forces in Alaska is much more about creating an extreme cold weather capable formation that could be used in Europe or the Indo-Pacific, Wormuth told the AP on a recent trip to Alaska to meet with senior commanders and troops. We're trying to get to a place where we have Arctic-capable forces that can survive and operate in that environment. That's been the goal of everybody that's fought there. The U.S. has long viewed the Arctic as a growing area of competition with Russia and also China, particularly as climate change brings warmer temperatures and opens the sea lanes for longer periods of time. But officials have acknowledged that the U.S. lags behind those nations. Russia has taken steps to increase its military presence there, and China views the region as economically valuable for shipping and natural resources. The changes in the Army were under consideration well before U.S. tensions with Russia soared following its invasion of Ukraine. Under the new Army plan, yeah, it might have been, but boy, they sure are accelerating it now, aren't they? Yes, they are. Under the new Army plan, the 1st Stryker Brigade Combat Team, 25th Infantry Division, now based in Alaska, would be converted to a light infantry brigade. Combined with the division's 4th Infantry Brigade Combat Team, the two units will become the 11th Airborne Division based in Alaska. And the large Stryker vehicles, which is somewhat old, would be replaced by other vehicles that are more suitable for the ice and snowy terrain. All right, that brings us to our break. And when we get back from that break, we will go through weather from around the world, and we will finish up with the stories that we've curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Take Two Movie Review. I'm Clinton Johnston. This week, getting medieval on your ass. When current hot new director Robert Eggers was a kid, Eggers, whose Hamlet precursor Viking tale The Northman is now in theaters, close on the heels of his surreal The Lighthouse. Anyway, when Eggers was a kid, he, like many other boys, discovered superhero comics. But then, a family friend introduced Eggers to some Renaissance engravings, plunging him into the world of medieval Western Europe, its images and its stories. This biographical fact helps make sense of The Northman, because to tell this Icelandic tale, Eggers and co-writer Icelandic poet Sean have used a medieval style of storytelling. So, in medieval tales, plot is king, but is handled differently than we're used to. There's not really much concern for suspense or arcs. It's just this thing happens, and then this, and then this. Themes are mostly non-existent, incidental at best, and character follows a whole different set of rules. People can be motivated by emotion, but primarily a supernatural force tells you what to do, and you either do it or you don't to reap the rewards or suffer the consequences. Toss psychology and character depth. Here's where you are, what you have, and what you must do. Go. This style can be hard for people used to realism and naturalism-influenced melodrama. People addicted to, well, so-and-so wouldn't really do that. That thinking will only kill your enjoyment of The Northman. Why does Olga fall for Amleth? Because her gods tell her to. When Amleth finds his father-murdering uncle, why not kill him right there and then? Because he's been told his fate is to take revenge at the fiery gates of hell. To be honest, considering how streamlined your storytelling becomes, I'm surprised more movies aren't told using medieval rules. Eggers specifically wanted this level of simplicity to focus on visually and experientially immersing you into his strange, mythic testosterone trip, which is The Northman's true strength. That and giving Anna Taylor-Joy another chance to define a character through her hair color. This has been Take Two Movie Review. I'm Clinton Johnston. Catch up with us at TakeTwoMovieReview.com and feed us back on our channel on YouTube.
This is Scientific American's 60-Second Science. I'm Tulika Bose. Today, supermassive news from space. The first image of the supermassive black hole at the center of the Milky Way, Sagittarius A star, was just released by astronomers this morning. I'm here talking to Seth Fletcher, our chief features editor for Scientific American. He literally wrote a book on the Event Horizon Telescope and is our resident expert on all things black holes. So Seth, what does it actually take to photograph a black hole?
So, as you know, black holes are technically unseeable. They trap everything that falls inside, including light. Anything that passes through the event horizon, which is the boundary, is trapped there forever. It can just never escape. But supermassive black holes like Sagittarius A star are surrounded by glowing, obliterated matter that's orbiting the black hole. Some of it's falling in, some of it just forms this disk around it. And that stuff glows, and the black hole, because of the way it warps space-time around it, because of the incredible force of gravity, it casts a shadow against that glowing matter. And so that's actually what we see in this picture.
So we know that astronomers captured this image with a worldwide network of radio observatories called the Event Horizon Telescope, or the EHT. That's what you wrote a book about. Can you tell me a little bit about this?
People figured out a few decades ago that you could collect a certain wavelength of radio light in microwaves, and if you could do it with a radio telescope the size of the Earth, you would be able to resolve something as small to us as the black hole at the center of the Milky Way, or at least what people thought was there. An amazing thing about radio astronomy is that there's a technique called interferometry that lets you combine multiple dishes that are very far apart into a single effective virtual telescope.
It's the biggest high-resolution technique in all of astronomy. What does it actually mean, Seth?
There's only a very limited period of time each year when telescopes in Europe, North America, South America, Antarctica can all see the same things in the sky. So they put together these elaborate schedule of when Sagittarius A star, for example, is going to be up over the horizon and visible to what telescopes. They just scan black holes for several nights. Then they take all the data in hard drives. Then they physically ship it to 2 supercomputer banks, one in Massachusetts, one in Germany, and then they correlate it all into a single data set, and then they search it for common detections where all of the telescopes have seen the same thing.
And why is this such a big deal?
This is only the second black hole we've ever seen directly, but it's much cooler than that. This is sort of our own private supermassive black hole. This is at the very center of the Milky Way galaxy. It's the solution to a mystery that people have been trying to solve for a really long time. Now that we get to see it, we get to see it change. We get to watch it in the future, and that could make possible all kinds of interesting science about gravity, space-time, black holes, galaxy formation. Who knows what people are going to be able to cook up.
The astronomers also say that in the future, as they add more observatories to the AHT, they'll even be able to make movies of Sagittarius A star. I guess that would look like videos of matter circling the drain before falling into an abyss. For 60 Second Science, I'm Talika Bose.
One in 6 Americans get sick from eating contaminated food each year. Contamination caused by salmonella is especially common. It's sometimes found in poultry, eggs, ground beef, pork, and even peanut butter. To reduce your risk from this and other foodborne germs, remember to clean, separate, cook, and chill. Clean your hands with soap and water. Separate raw meat, poultry, and seafood from other foods. Wash counters, cutting boards, and utensils before and after using them. Cook all food thoroughly and use a food thermometer to make sure food is cooked. Promptly chill meat, poultry, eggs, and other perishables. Finally, don't prepare food for others if you're sick, and be extra careful when you prepare food for children, pregnant women, the elderly, or people in poor health. To learn more about making food safer to eat, visit www.cdc.gov/vital signs.
Hi, I'm Tom Hartman, and since you're listening to netrootsradio.com, show your progressive side and go to the donate button on the bottom of the homepage. It's progressives like you who power Netroots Radio and keep the progressive message beaming everywhere 24 hours a day. Just go to our donate button at the bottom of netrootsradio.com. Thank you for keeping progressive radio at full power.
Here are 2 terms you don't expect to see together: the state of Alabama and progressive leader. Okay, I'm a Texan, so I have no standing to point at the rank regressiveness of any other state government, but still, Alabama? And yet, the Camellia State has flowered as a model of strong progressive action in one area of critical public importance: quality child care. It's a cliche to say our children are our future, but it's also true. Why then do we invest so little in our littlest ones, our future? America's child care system is a national disgrace, failing to provide safe places for children of working parents and failing to boost the education of pre-kindergarten tykes. Moreover, the abject failure of state and national officials to meet this basic social need is spreading inequality, rolling back opportunities for women, and severely restricting economic progress. Yet, Alabama officials have recently been setting the national standard for effective pre-K programs by making a major investment in its 4- and 5-year-olds, operating a statewide child care network. A major factor in its success is a 2-generation approach, not only educating the kiddos, but also providing support materials and coaching so that parents engage as their children's first teachers. Producing demonstrable results year after year, the state's public network gets bipartisan support and funding from the Alabama legislature. The program is free and available to all, with special attention devoted to enlisting often overlooked families in rural, poor, and people of color communities. Alabama is paying and respecting teachers as the professionals they are. This is Jim Hightower saying, if one of our poorest states can rise to meet this basic human need, what's wrong with the richest country in the history of the world?
Welcome to 60 Second Civics from the Center for Civic Education. We're joined today by Dr. Scott Casper, President of the American Antiquarian Society. Dr. Casper, what are the strengths and weaknesses of a government with separated branches versus a parliamentary system?
In a parliamentary system, the executive branch, by definition, is controlled by the party that controls the legislative branch. That is, the head of the governing party in the legislature becomes the prime minister, the head of the executive branch. So if you want to get laws passed, then a parliamentary system might be preferable to the system that we have of checks and balances. If, however, you want to keep laws from getting passed, or keep particular laws from getting passed, you might find the system that we have quite amenable to your interests. It often depends on the side that a person is on, whether they want to see a law passed, in which case our system seems rather cumbersome, or whether they'd like to see something stopped, in which case our system seems like a brilliant act of the framers.
That's all for today's podcast. Check out more interviews with Dr. Scott Casper in Unit 2 of the We the People Open course, a free online course on the U.S. Constitution at learn.civiced.org. 60 Second Civics, where civic education only takes a minute.
Does the lack of the word abortion in the Constitution mean it's not a right? I'm Bill Newman, and this is the Civil Liberties Minute. Justice Alito thinks so. In his draft opinion in the Dobbs case, Alito relies on the fact that the Constitution does not mention the word abortion. But at the time the Constitution was adopted, women were guaranteed no civil rights, so why would anyone even imagine that the word abortion would appear? Besides, the historical record indicates that at the time of the country's founding, abortion was not prohibited. So again, why would it be mentioned? Using Alito's logic, future opinions of the Supreme Court could begin by stating, correctly, that the word marriage does not appear in the Constitution, and neither does the word homosexual or gay or contraceptive, and the word privacy, it's nowhere to be found. Rather, the Constitution guarantees us liberty, which, according to the dictionary, is the state of being free from oppressive restrictions imposed by authority on one's way of life, behavior, or political views. Although Alito later inserts the disclaimer that abortion is different, his analysis proves the opposite. And so his draft opinion puts a whole host of rights at grave, grave risk. The take-home lesson? Don't assume that rights you have today are rights you'll have tomorrow. The Civil Liberties Minute is made possible by the ACLU because freedom can't protect itself.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1998. And if you tried to catch a cab in New York City on that particular day, you probably did not have much luck. The city's yellow cab drivers held a one-day strike to protest Mayor Rudolph Giuliani's new taxi cab regulations. 90% of the city's more than 12,000 taxi cabs stayed parked on that day. 2,000 cabs lined up along 14th Street and Avenue D in a demonstration of strength and a sign of solidarity. It was the first taxi driver strike in New York City in 30 years. The strike was led by the National Taxi Workers Alliance and their founder, Ravi Desai. After 15 years of trying to organize, the taxi drivers had just founded their union that February. The union represented workers from 85 countries, as many of the cab drivers were immigrants. The New York Times reported that city officials were stunned by the success of the strike. The one-day action showed the solidarity of the taxi drivers union. Today, the Taxi Workers Alliance represents 200,000 taxi drivers who provide an estimated 1 billion rides each year to New Yorkers and tourists. One New York taxi driver expressed the union's importance, saying, "With my union, I get the spiritual boost and the inspiration to overcome the obstacles in my track. I am a member of the AFL-CIO. It's a great feeling." Unionization is important for taxi drivers. They often have to pay steep fees for their medallion to operate their cabs, and fluctuating fuel costs can eat into their profits. Rideshare programs such as Uber are further eroding cab drivers' livelihoods. Organizing workers like cab drivers, car wash workers, and service employees is an important front for today's labor movement. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, and follow us at Labor History in 2.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Blue Moon Spirits Fridays, because we are all Nighthawks in the Diner of Life. We always begin weather from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River and the Rogue River Valley of southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 51 degrees Fahrenheit, expecting highs in the mid-60s, with mostly cloudy today with rain ending for the afternoon, and winds will be out of the southwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour. And it looks like we're going to be getting something less than a quarter inch, actually almost a quarter inch. And that rain actually should start in about an hour and a half. Showers this evening with lows in the low 50s and then becoming less numerous overnight, the showers, not the temp. Winds will be light and variable, and it also will bring almost a quarter of an inch. That's a half an inch in a 24-hour period. Okay, light, I guess. Looks like we're going to be in the mid-70s tomorrow. How nice. And mid-70s on Sunday. How nice. It'll be cloudy, though, with winds out of the southwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour. And forecast of rain somewhat for tomorrow. Looks like it might be the ending of the overnight rain into the morning. And then a bit of a drying out period, and then in the middle of the week, they are forecasting some more rain. Well, that's good. Confirmed cases of coronavirus in Jackson County in the southern part of Oregon are coming in very infrequently now in terms of the results, not that we are lowering our infections. People are taking home tests, and they're not reporting, and then they die. Or they get so sick that they then have to go in. But these numbers still, at this point, stand from yesterday at 434,063 confirmed cases, and the deceased stands at 533. But those are not updated totals. I guess we'll get them on Wednesday now. Looks like grass pollen is very high right outside the window here in Rogue River proper. The air quality index for the region is good at 20 parts per million, and the daytime UV index, though it be cloudy and rainy, is very high at level 8. So take care. Cover up. Put on some sunscreen. Maybe SP30 or more. Barometric pressure is holding steady at 30.25 inches. Visibility is at 7 miles. And relative humidity is at 98%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. London is 68 degrees and fair. Paris is 71 and sunny. Rome is 80 degrees and fair. Kyiv is 70 and mostly cloudy. Kabul is 70 and partly cloudy. Hong Kong is 75 degrees with rain showers. Tokyo is 68 and cloudy. Sydney, Australia is 65 and cloudy. San Francisco, California is 56 degrees and sunny, and New York, New York is 64 degrees Fahrenheit and cloudy. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. Patrick Quinn of the Associated Press brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. The EU proposed helping Ukraine export its wheat and other grains by rail, road, and river to get around a Russian blockade of Black Sea ports, which is preventing those critical supplies from reaching parts of the world. The European Union's executive arm said the plan aims to establish alternative routes and ease congestion between borders that also should facilitate getting humanitarian aid and other goods into the war-torn country. The head of the European Investment Bank said this week that Ukraine is sitting on 8 billion euros worth of wheat it cannot export. In addition to the port blockade, Ukraine's foreign ministry has accused Russia of stealing grain and trying to sell some on the global markets. It cited official estimates indicating that Russia already may have stolen 400 to 500,000 metric tons of grain that cost over $100 million. It asserted that practically all ships leaving Sebastopol with a load of grain are carrying grain stolen from Ukraine. To get Ukraine's food supplies to the world, Europe is looking to increase shipments by railroads and trucks. Trains have started carrying loads of grain to Austria and Germany via other EU countries, but the amount is only a fraction of the Black Sea port capacity. A key challenge is the diverging rail gauge widths between Ukraine and EU countries. Since Ukrainian railroad cars don't fit with most of the EU network, goods need to be transferred to trucks or other rail cars adapted to the system. The average wait time for thousands of rail cars at Ukraine's border with the 27-nation bloc is 16 days, reaching up to 30 in some places.
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière, la promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle, c'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
Javier Cordoba of the Associated Press brings us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. After a month of crippling ransomware attacks, Costa Rica has declared a state of emergency. In theory, the measure, usually reserved to deal with natural disasters or COVID-19 pandemic, would free up the government to react more nimbly to the crisis. President Chavez, who was sworn in on Sunday, made the emergency declarations one of his first acts. It was published on Wednesday, but Chavez has not named the members of the National Emergency Commission. The declaration refers to the attack Costa Rica is suffering at the hands of cyber criminals and cyber terrorists. The Russian-speaking Conti gang had claimed responsibility for the attack. Last week, the State Department offered a $10 million reward for information leading to the identification or location of Conti leaders. The attack began in April when the Costa Rican Finance Ministry was the first to report that a number of its systems were affected, including tax collection and customs. Attacks also targeted the Social Security Agency's Human Resources System and Labor Ministry. The Costa Rican government has not reported an expansion of the attack, but some systems, especially at the Finance Ministry, still are not functioning normally. The government has also not made an estimate of the losses caused by the attack. Carlos Alvarado was still president when the attacks began, and he said Costa Rica would not pay the gang any ransom. In the U.S. State Department statement last week, it said the Conti group had been responsible for hundreds of ransomware incidents during the past 2 years. The FBI estimates that as of January of 2022, there had been over 1,000 victims of attacks associated with Conti ransomware, with victim payouts exceeding $150 million, making the Conti ransomware variant the costliest strain of ransomware ever documented. Well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day and the week. But you do know Netroots Radio broadcasts on, and we will meet up on Monday for River City Hash Mondays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day, all night, and all weekend for all the breaking news as it breaks. And we will meet up here on Monday, right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver.